So welcome everyone after the break. I think I can introduce Barbara Mielcarek-Krzyżanowska, who will lead this session. Without further ado, it's already 4, so I think we are ready to start.
Thank you very much. I am honored to chair section number 5 of the International Online Conference on Renewable Music. We have small changes in program. The section will be shorter. Mr. Wojciech Kwapisiński has withdrawn with the participation, so we will listen to papers prepared by Anna Wójcikowska and Katarzyna Figat. Topics will focus around issues of performing avant-garde music, which is renewal for each time, and creating archives for reused existing works. So I would like to invite the first speaker, Anna Wójcikowska, Assistant Professor at the Department of Music Theory of Grażyna and Kiejstut Bacewicz Academy of Music in Łódź. She is a member of the Artur Rubinstein Philharmonic Choir and author of the book Topicality of Avant-Garde, Modernist Trends in the Works of Marcin Strzelecki and Artur Zagajewski. She obtained her PD degree at her alma mater with the dissertation The Activity of the Warsaw Music Workshop, Phenomenon of Open Performance. She participated in conferences in Barcelona, Warsaw, and Łódź, and has published both scientific and journalistic articles about 20th and 21st century music. So I invite Anna Wójcikowska.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very honored to be able to speak to such a distinguished international public. I will share my screen now in a second. Everything should be fine, as we have checked already. Okay, and without further ado, as you can see on the screen, the topic of my presentation is Bogusław Schaeffer's Quartet SG, reinterpreted by the Warsaw Music Workshop, open performance viewed as upcycling composers' ideas. There are a few elements to this topic. We have Bogusław Schaeffer, the composer, Quartet SG, his piece. We have the Warsaw Music Workshop, or Warsztat Muzyczny, the famous avant-garde performative group from the 1960s, 70s, and 80s. And we have the notion of open performance. I will try and more or less in-depth touch on each and every of these topics. So the piece that will be discussed today was composed in 1968, over half a century ago. It situates us in communist Polish People's Republic, in a reality in which ecological awareness was non-existent, sustainability and renewable resources were not a topic at all, and even less would anyone have thought of considering music in such contexts. But why not recontextualize Bogusław Schaeffer's work in its performative situation? Why not read past phenomena anew from today's perspective and bring up the topic of renewability in a metaphorical way? Maybe not exactly ecological or economical, as we have already heard during this conference. When we think about renewability in terms of Western art music, there appears an association with all kinds of open, indeterminate, and aleatoric forms, which have been designed in such a way that each interpretation of the piece is in fact a different incarnation of it. Open form is most often understood as a work with a variable external form, the course of which is composed, while the formal shape, for example, the order of the links, remains at the discretion of the performer. We also encounter broader definitions. A musical form whose shape constitutes an element of artistic creation transferred to the performer. So here in this definition, the performative element of and the creative role of the interpreters is underlined. Or a genre guided by an exploratory goal, getting to know the music itself its secrets, while pieces representing this type do not cease to be works of art. This is Bogusław Schaeffer's definition of open form, quite a poetic one, I would say. The pioneer of the open form is considered to be Karl-Heinz Stockhausen. For example, his famous Klavierstück 11 from 1952 is a prime example of an open form. Such a concept also can be found in works of, for example, Pierre Boulez, and among Poles, among others, Kazimierz Serocki, Bogusław Schaeffer, Leoncjusz Ciuciura, and others. In order to introduce the element of chance, or rather choice, to musical performance, it was necessary to loosen the framework of musical notation. The simplest solution to that was to abandon the bar line and instead use approximate notation in which the spacing of the notes on the staff, not their shape, suggests their duration. Approximate notation is derived directly from traditional notation and allows relatively little freedom of performance. The next step was to move from musical symbols to graphical signs and drawings. With the increasing ambiguity of the notation and freedom of its interpretation, the graphic factor increased. And the last link of this chain is musical graphic, a genre that exemplifies the maximum degree of performance indeterminacy, using not a sign, but a drawing. An intermediate form between conventional notation and musical graphic is graphic notation. So a notation that uses drawings as a system of signs, for example, by adding verbal instructions to the score by a composer. Bogusław Schaeffer points to Musik konkret and elektronische Musik as the genesis of graphic notation, for example, Stockhausen's scores of electronic pieces, tape pieces. This type of score, that is, using graphic notation, is represented by Bogusław Schaeffer's Quartet SG, dedicated to and premiered by the Warsaw Music Workshop. We will get to the piece in a moment. Now, a few words about the ensemble. The Warsaw Music Workshop, a pioneering group of contemporary music performance in Poland, was founded in late 1967 by pianist and composer Zygmunt Krause, and originates directly from a series of concerts under the same name, Music Workshop, organized in the 1960s as part of the activity of the Polish Radio Experimental Studio. Krause's main motivation was to establish a professional ensemble of new music, holding regular rehearsals, as Krause said, like a renowned string quartet, classical string quartet, and gathering a staple base of repertoire. Due to the quite unusual instrumental combination, so clarinet, trombone, cello, and piano, it was necessary for composers to create new pieces for the workshop especially. The musicians have gathered a large pool of pieces played regularly throughout 20 years of stage activity, some of them even more than 100 times, composed by artists from Europe, Asia, and both Americas. The Warsaw Quartet also made numerous archival recordings for radio stations in the Netherlands, Austria, Yugoslavia, the Federal Republic of Germany, and Poland, and recorded one long play, Polish avant-garde music, released in 1970 by Polskie Nagrania, which was then reissued 3 years later by the Swedish label Caprice Records under the title Polsk Musikwerkstatt. It included pieces by Włodzimierz Kotoński, Kazimierz Serocki, Bogusław Schaeffer, Witold Szalonek, Zygmunt Krause, and Andrzej Dobrowolski, all composed between 1965 and 1970, so very fresh new compositions. In general, these actions can be interpreted as a protest against the disposable nature of contemporary music in a world where most new compositions fall into oblivion after their public premiere. The concert series in Polish Radio Experimental Studio, from which the Warsaw Music Workshop Quartet later originated, was an extraordinary initiative to introduce the audience from behind the Iron Curtain to the Western avant-garde novelties. However, it had a major flaw. The many musicians that were partaking in this project did not create a group rehearsing regularly and systematically, but gathered up each time in a different personal lineup, preparing quickly a few modern pieces, treating them as single-use works. There was no time or space for in-depth interpretations, building a repertoire, developing interpersonal relationships so important for the dynamic of an ensemble. That is why, after the project had ended, Zygmunt Krause made the decision to form a musical group with a different work ethic. During my recent research on the Warsaw Music Workshop's fruitful career, I coined the term open performance to define their artistic attitude at the interface between performance and creativity, combined with a popularizing and culture-creating role, redefining the concept of music interpretation. Its influence goes far beyond the score. Open performance is a broad term describing artistic choices and actions, professional achievements in popularizing contemporary repertoire, as well as performative versatility and creative performance style. Analyzing the repertoire of the Warsaw Music Workshop, we can see that the vast majority of pieces represent avant-garde and experimental trends. Among them, we can recognize 5 groups. So first, aleatoric and indeterministic pieces. Second, sonoristic pieces and, generally speaking, music focused on sound. 3, minimal and repetitive music. 4, action music, instructional pieces and instrumental theater. And 5, compositions using a graphic element in the notation. The last category, widely represented, divides into 2 subgroups: musical graphics, including, for example, Earl Brown's November 52 and December 52, which are considered the first ever musical graphics. Also pieces by John Cage, Bogusław Schaeffer, Dubravko de Toni, Richard Kittler. And the second subgroup is graphic notations, represented by Toshi Ichiyanagi, Leoncjusz Ciuciura, again Dubravka de Toni, Wilfried Jentsch, Bent Lorentzen, Wilhelm Zobel, and Bogusław Schaeffer's Quartet SG. The analysis of sound realizations of musical graphics poses many methodological problems, as such a form of notation embodies the maximum degree of openness of a musical work. Due to the fact that the way of reading the contents of the score is arbitrary, it is impossible to follow the course of the recorded work while simultaneously following the score, and even less to verify the compliance, adequacy, or correctness of the realization. In such a case, the score and its sound interpretations are separate works with separate identities. It seems that it is necessary to make an individual analysis of each form of the work and then to attempt to indicate the points of contact between the sound realizations and the score, also taking into account the verbal commentary, which is an extension of the composer's thought. The composition dedicated to the Warsaw Music Workshop was intended for any 4 instruments, preferably with different timbres. The duration is minimum of 12 minutes. And the piece is written using signs, musical and abstract, enclosed in geometrical shapes marked with letters of the alphabet, as you can see on the slide. This is the first page of the score. The score consists of 39 sections, including the transition between the letters Y and Z, not marked with a separate letter. 12 sections are enclosed in rectangular forms and 27 in non-rectangular forms. I'm mentioning that because the realization of the rectangles and other shapes is a little bit different. I will speak about it in a moment. Including 14, additionally containing a vertical dashed line, indicating the point of strict synchronization between all the instruments. The graphic layout resembles a traditional score, meaning it should be read left to right, downwards, and the 4 parts are placed one under the other, just similarly to like an orchestra score, traditional score. The piece fits on 5 pages. The composer added a commentary with performance instructions to the score. We read that the interpretation of symbols is free, although each similar sign requires transposition to a different pitch, to a new rhythmic or articulatory dimension, etc. That was a quotation. The content of the rectangles should be played asynchronously, while the realization of signs in other shapes, circles, triangles, and other, sometimes requires synchronization. Schaeffer writes that this simultaneity should be both visible and audible. and synchronous points are marked with a vertical dashed line. The author does not specify what the aforementioned simultaneity should consist of, whether it should be an agreement of the sound material between instruments or playing in rhythmic unison, etc. The dynamics are ad libitum. The pairs of instruments should dialogue with each other, or rather compete, taking away each other's superiority. It is recommended to perform the piece without collective preparation, but there is no mention of individual preparation. It should be noted that the composer's commentary attached to the score is full of contradictions. On the one hand, Schaeffer gives the performers supposedly complete freedom of interpretation and even the right to omit some signs in the performance, while on the other hand, he creates certain vague rules and reservations. The composer wants the performers to combine the roles of soloists and ensemble musicians in one piece. That additionally should be performed without collective preparation, so spontaneously. Moreover, as the musicians perform their parts independently of each other, the time parameter has not been specified in any way, and the composer does not address the issue of group communication. It is therefore impossible to guarantee that all four instruments will meet at the nodal points marked with dashed lines. The piece was recorded by the Warsaw Music Workshop 3 times. The first recording, marked here with letter A, is a live performance of the Polish premiere on the Warsaw Autumn in 1970, and the other two, B and C, are studio recordings for the Polish radio in 1977 and 1985. I will now present three excerpts of those three interpretations, very short ones, about a minute each. If you find them silly, I think you might feel free to laugh, because both the composer and the instrumentalists had great sense of humor, so I'm sure a comical effect, at least in some parts of those interpretations, was intended, I believe. Also, in the meantime, you may take a look at the table shown here on the slide. There are some basic data about these informations in Schaeffer's score. So, recording A. Recording B. I think if you listened very closely, there was Wagner's Tristan chord hidden somewhere in this interpretation. And recording C. I am aware that these 3 short excerpts do not tell us much about differences between these 3 interpretations, but I still think it is important to listen to it to at least grasp the aesthetic and the stylistic of those avant-garde performances. Although the compliance of the performances with the score is impossible to verify in case of musical graphics and graphic notation, it is possible to attempt to compare them with Schaeffer's additional guidelines included in the commentary attached to the score. Recordings A and C meet the criterion of minimum duration. Recording B is merely 5 seconds shorter than the composer wanted. The number of sections that make up the form of the piece does not match. 17, 12, and 14 sections respectively, compared to 39 included in the score. As for the way of conducting musical thought, in none of the 3 recordings can one clearly indicate the pairs of instruments that should be in dialogue with each other, nor is it possible to locate the points of momentary synchronization between all the voices, which are written in the score as a dashed line. All three works recorded on tape are distinct in terms of both form and musical content, timbre, material, and even instrumentation. They share certain common elements. The structure of each piece consists of contrasting sections. The musicians use extended performance techniques, and in addition to instruments, they also use their voices. However, the 3 recorded pieces, which are essentially improvisations, all represent distinct aesthetics that fit within the framework of avant-garde stylistic. Each of the 3 interpretations is based on the musician's experience with other pieces composed for the group. So recording A is quite sonoristic. It shows great similarity to Improvisation sonoristique by Witold Szalonek. This is one of the most often played compositions by the Warsaw Music Workshop. And as we can see, the recording comes from 1970. Improvisation sonoristique is in the repertoire from the 1968. Recording B, one can hear the influence of Zygmunt Krause's pieces inspired by folk music. So they have the same instrumentation as Soundscape and Idle, composed in mid-1970s. And again, the recording is from 1977. And recording C, made only 3 years before the ensemble ended its activity, is a great synthesis of experiences in collective improvisation. Schaeffer's piece requires extraordinary creative inventiveness from the musicians, not only because of the form of notation itself, but also because the composer sets difficult requirements that cannot be fully met. The way out of this situation is to practice what can be called open performance, to consciously resign from attempting to fully implement the score and commentary, and as a result, to create original works by upcycling composers' thoughts and intentions, renewing the musical piece over and over again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Anna Wójcikowska, for your interesting presentation, for speaking about a very important aesthetic problem. The musical work is a kind of message, we know, and the methods, of course, various methods of musical graphics in 20th century are the causes of open musical works more than earlier. You analyzed overparametric music, Quartet written in 1968 for many musicians. I don't know if I understand you exactly. You told us about 3 different performances, and after the last one, you told that there are 3 more, or not?
No, these are the 3 recordings made by the Warsaw Music Workshop. I think they did perform the piece in total maybe 5 or 4 times. I'm not sure. I should check it. The piece that was recorded a lot more by Bogusław Schaeffer by the Warsaw Music Workshop was Quartet 2+2. However, this was not a piece written especially for the Warsaw Music Workshop. It's an earlier piece. That's why I decided to go for Quartet SG, as this is the original form, and the Warsaw Music Workshop were its first performers.
Because I'm interested if creative imagination of Krause decided that all three performances are so interesting, so different, with using voices, folk instruments, and so on. And maybe one question, my question, what do you think about, it is maybe controversial question, what do you think about opinion that the graphical score is solution with problems with composing musical form? Do you agree or not exactly?
Could you repeat, because the sound was not very clear and I didn't understand?
Yes, of course. Yes, of course. What do you think about opinion that the graphical score is solution with composers' problem with musical form, with composing musical form?
A tricky question. I'm not a composer. I'm a music theorist. I think in the situation of in the case of Bogusław Schaeffer, his legacy is so wide. There's such a wide variety of different forms that I don't think that we could say this particular thing about this particular composer. I think as an experimentative genre, how do I say it? Well, it's a means of searching for a solution, I think, for a composer, right? As each and every experimental piece, it's meant to be an experiment. We are not really certain of the effect that it will give. It is an experiment, and I think it's best for a composer to maybe try with a musical graphic or graphic notation, but aside from other genres and forms.
Mm-hmm. So it is building a kind of special relation between composer, performer, and listener, yes?
Certainly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. And I can see that Dr. Paweł Siechowicz has a question, so I would like you join us, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that talk and bringing the person of Bogusław Schaeffer and the creative musicians from the workshop. I think that the issue of a sense of humor of music in music is something very interesting, because you cannot tell the same joke twice and make it funny and once again and again. But if you leave the freedom to the performers to joke about something repeatedly, it might be still funny. So I think it is a clever way to convey a sense of humor in music that was used by Bogusław Schaeffer this time.
Mm-hmm. I agree to that, but also let's remember that this piece was written in 1968, so Bogusław Schaeffer was quite young back then. He didn't really develop his composer persona yet. And I will say that when I was reading the performative instructions attached to the piece, they seemed quite serious, but also very contradictory. So as I said in my paper, in my presentation, the demands for the performer to realize many different contradicting roles was really I was really struck by it when I read the commentary. Whereas, well, the Warsaw Music Workshop seemed like, as the years went by and as they were performing the piece over and over again, they were just kind of pushing the composer's commentary further and further and taking more individual initiative.
Yeah, it is very interesting, because I think it is very hard to discern right now what is a joke and what is a serious matter. And as you say, something that begins as a serious, completely serious thing, in the process of performing this material and reception of it, it might become like affirmatively humorous. So it is not a bad thing now to laugh about it. I think, and this is something that that I very much appreciate about Schaeffer. There was a time in high school that I was watching his theater pieces for Jan Peszek and others, and it was like something that feed my imagination. So this is the Schaeffer that I like very much. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. And I can see that Jagoda Szmytka would like to ask a question.
Yes, it's not really a question. So also thank you for your presentation. But actually, I think it is pity we are not in the same panel or session, because I bring the subject of the musical notation, and I also wanted to refer to Professor Barbara Mielcarek-Krzyżanowska. Also, the question like what is the like conditioning of the potential of a composition by the notation itself. I think it is something very interesting, and I want to bring it to the table in a way. But this is always a personal, like not everybody wants to make the same structures on the same terms. But anyway, notation is a huge topic. Maybe today I just say like a Wittgenstein thing. So the limits of our imagination are conditioned by the limits of our language, and I could say musical notation. So what one can compose is also conditioned on what one can write down. And actually this relationship, of course, I think in your presentation, Bogusław Schaeffer is a huge topic. And of course, it is a great tradition, a great persona, composer. Everybody knows him. And but it's also different times, I think, in general, when we think of graphic notation, but also maybe even a Polish composer school like the sonorism time, where these elements of graphical notation were also present. I think, it's interesting. It is something. It's pity we cannot in the same session to speak about it. I have it tomorrow, so I don't want to.
It's a very important problem in 20th century and 21st century music general, I think.
Yes, thank you very much, Jagoda. And in terms of musical notation, I will plug in this amazing, fantastic, genius book by Professor Ewa Kowalska-Zając, Zobaczyć muzykę, notacja polskiej partytury współczesnej. But this goes far, far beyond just a Polish score. Absolutely fantastic, genius book. I highly recommend it. So I just wanted to plug it in a little bit.
Okay. So I would like to thank you, Dr. Anna Wójcikowska, once more. And now I would like to invite Katarzyna Figat, Dr. Katarzyna Figat. She is assistant professor at the Feliks Nowowiejski Academy of Music in Bydgoszcz, as well as the lecturer at the National Film School. Film School in Łódź, where she teaches sound in film to the students of animation and film editing. She works as a music supervisor and sound editor for feature film, documentaries, and TV series. The topic of Katarzyna paper is Music Granar, the second life of Polish theater music. Microphone is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I'm very honored to be here with you today and to present the Music Granar platform as the premiere, because as I would mention during my presentation, during my talk, nobody except from the creators has ever seen this platform. It has its premiere in 2 weeks, so you are the first people to hear about it, something more detailed than just an information. It exists, it starts to exist. As my presentation would show, there should be, I believe, the quotation mark at the end of the title. My aim is to present the main goals and process of building the Music Granar project, the Music Granar platform. But to be honest, I don't want to remain uncritical of some of decisions and choices made by the creators of this platform. So at the end, there will be some some space for my comments and concerns about this construction. Although the platform I will be talking about has not seen its premiere yet, it's even not yet publicly available. Since July 2023, I have had the pleasure of working with its creators as a consultant and also temporarily as a sound engineer, working with the audio music, which was being prepared to be presented on the platform. Three different contexts, this different context of working with Music Granar team have given me bright insight into the process of creating the platform, as well as preparing the materials, business strategy, etc. So as a result, today I believe I can call myself somehow competent to tell you the story of creation of this unique platform, which would become available to the wide audience and clients in upcoming months. The author of the concept of creating the theatrical music base in the later development of this idea called Music Granar is Janusz Stokłosa, a well-known Polish composer. For most of us, probably associated this name with the authorship of the music for the cult musical Metro, to the libretto by Agata and Marina Miklaszewskie, directed by Janusz Józefowicz, which is staged continuously since January 1991. So for more than 33 years, the show has been performed on many big stages, including Broadway twice, France and Russia, and in Poland, firstly in the stage of the Drama Theatre in Warsaw, later in their own studio Buffo Theatre, also in Warsaw. In total, the show has been performed more than 3,000 times over these years, and today, in 2024, it continues to be played to overbooked audiences, often staged in huge arenas seating several thousand people each. Janusz Stokłosa's status as the initiator and manager of this project seems to be crucial in this context. It's undeniable that not every person who would offer this kind of collaboration to the theaters or other composers, at least, would be listened to at all, let alone establish the cooperation in such a productive way. The main Stokłosa's idea, as written on the Music Granar website, is to preserve the music composed specifically to the theatrical plays. This music was composed often by quite famous composers, performed by the top musicians of the times, and what is often mentioned during the discussion on the project is composed for the reason, not just to be objectively useful, as it usually works in case of the typical music library cues, but it's music composed for something, for a reason, in a specific context with specific idea and intention. So this kind of music pieces are able to be evergreens in their kinds. Two paths in Stokłosa's activities are therefore quite evident. On the one hand, the idea of recovering the music from the archives, theater archives, and making it available again to the general public. On the other, the context of the commercial exploitation of this music, which is usually put aside ad hoc once the play has been taken off the theatrical stage. Although the music does not lose its substantive musical value after being taken off the theatrical stage, the authors are not given any opportunity, usually are not given any opportunity to further exploit it, which could prove beneficial both from the point of view of expanding their offer known to the general public and from the purely profit-making perspective. A separate idea, the separate Stokłosa's idea, is the creation of the opportunity for young authors to promote and distribute their work via Music Granar platform. Among the composers represented for now by the Music Granar platform, one can find both creators of an older generation like Jerzy Maksymiuk, born in 1936, and for example, Jan Kanty-Pawluśkiewicz, and very young authors, for example, Krzysztof Falkowski, born in 1996, that's the youngest person for now, and for example, Jan Stokłosa, born in 1986. Importantly, the creators, the composers of the younger generation have the opportunity to make all their music available on the platform, not only this composed for the theater. The only rule for such a cooperation is that the creator, the composer, confirms the ownership, all disposition of all copyrights, both authors and master to the work in question. A typical course of the work on this project within this project consists of several steps. The first step, of course, is establishing the cooperation with the theater and getting access to the archives containing media with music from the theatrical plays that has been staged in the past. For now, at the moment, Music Granar has signed cooperation agreements with 7 Polish theaters as listed on the slide. As you can see, these are theaters representing works of different types, genres, and also dedicated to the different age groups of audiences. Negotiations with other entities are also underway. What is important to underline, as the Music Granar is essentially a private Stokłosa's project, these negotiations are not easy, and their positive outcome often depends on Janusz Stokłosa or other invited composers' private relations with the authorities of the individual theaters. The terms of such a collaboration vary depending on the period in which the music was created. This is a matter arising from the copyright regulation, general copyright regulations in Poland. As a general rule, the theater, as the holder of the master rights for the recording, agrees that Music Granar should represent these rights in context of further distribution sales in the theater. A separate issue is the agreement with the individual authors of the music, who also, by virtue of such an agreement, consent to the representation by Music Granar. As a result of such 2 agreements, Music Granar becomes the publisher of the recording obtained, and its responsibilities include the preparation of the recording in such a way that they could be made available at the platform, and the submission of these works to ZAIX due to the fact that they usually weren't submitted before, thus entitling creators to receive further remuneration in case of reuse, broadcasting, rebroadcasting of their work. So it causes additional remunerations called in Poland tantiemy. These general formalities are followed by the handover of the sound material to the Music Granar team. These are made available in very different formats and on very different media. This is due, on the one hand, to the period in which the music was created. On the other hand, it's a question of the technological working and archiving system functioning in the specific individual theaters. Although in some cases, there are some high-quality digital materials made available, in most cases, the materials are delivered on narrow magnetic tape, on DAT cassettes, or on mini discs. They therefore require digitization into digital format in the first instance, and this process is followed by the sound processing of the files. The selection, basic editing if needed, very basic sound restoration activities like denoising or dehuming, but only in general and a little. The obvious problem then is the differentiated quality of the sound files that can be offered to the platform audience as the final content. Some of these, due to the level of distortion and interferences and the impossibility of easily removing them, have to be labeled as archive recordings. Nonetheless, the overall quality of the materials obtained could be the subjects of more extensive analysis and discussion that would take place later on. Once the files have been processed, the stage of finalizing the formalities follows, the submission of separate music cues to the ZAIX, just to submit them as the author's works. The final stage of developing the material is the process of tagging the music cues. Tagging meaning making some descriptions of the work using short words, phrases, and concepts that enable them to be quickly identified and found in the music library. In the case of Music Granar, basing on the experience of other popular music libraries that were carefully analyzed at the very early stage of conceptualizing this specific platform, a two-level tagging method was adopted. First, so-called priority tags are assigned to the cues. These are key terms that describe the cue most accurately or refer to its most characteristic features. Secondly, some other tags are added to the list, and these tags may refer to the character, mood of the cue, ensemble, instruments performing tempo, form of the work, its style, etc., etc. On this slide, you can see an overview of the Music Granar search engine. It's analogous to the search engines of the popular music libraries such as Universal Production Music or Audio Network. However, the interface differs graphically. It's very simple, which can be noticed as an advantage, like simple, intuitive, really easy to be used, or disadvantages, or as a disadvantage, like being unattractive. The single record view is also similar to the one we are familiar with from the other music libraries. In addition to the title, here you can see that. Eventually, all the titles are to be translated into English. We can see the waveform of the file. So it's graphic representation of the dynamic progression over the time, a list of assigned tags, and short, attention, AI-generated description of the piece. The priority tags are marked with a star. So there are at least four general priority tags, and then a list of additional tags. Making a work available on the platform starts a new period in its, let's say, life. From now on, it will be possible to reuse it, for example, as an illustrative music in contemporary audiovisual productions. The only requirement will be the completion of the licensing formalities with the representative of Music Granar. At the moment, formal and financial details of these licenses are not yet published, but Music Granar project manager Weronika Bobotek assured me that they will be quite competitive with those currently available on the music library market. Although being a great admirer of this project at all, its constructions and progress raises, in my opinion, a number of questions and concerns. Does it make to build a new platform in the midst of so many currently available, offering thousands, if not tens of thousands of musical tracks? If we consider the business plan of the project, mainly the idea of collective licensing of the cues available on the Music Granar platform, primarily to the large business customers like TV stations or large film producers, on a collective licensing basis, does it stand a chance of breaking through in the maze of other options? Would the strictly musical value of these tracks, which also takes into account the context in which the cues were composed and recorded, be an advantage or disadvantages for the contemporary, for example, filmmakers? A separate issue in that context of functioning these works earlier would not be clear to the contemporary artists and audiences at all, as I suppose. Another problem would be specific form of the composition resulting from the dramatic flow of the play to which they were dedicated, which may be difficult to be adapted to the current needs of, for example, a run of a scene and the new work they are put in. What is more important, given the mentioned technical quality of the files, often the archival ones, the relatively indistinct track selection system, which was my experience during working on this project, would the platform be really competitive with the other music libraries? all these questions lead to the general question of the commercial potential of this platform. It's difficult to assess it unequivocally at this point, although given the course of the production process of audiovisual forms in Poland, it seems that aforementioned issue of the technical quality of the files may prove decisive in this context. On the other hand, thinking of the project as a kind of archive of Polish theater music, will such a construction of the database, of the music library base, would be useful to the theater lovers or researchers interested in these topics? Although the creators promised to publish all the digitized material without any selection via alternative website profiles for this archival value, I have not been able to obtain any precise information about it at this point. The archive was originally intended to be created in collaboration with the Raszewski Theatre Institute, but due to the transformation of the institution and ongoing staff changes, Music Granar team is considering creating a separate project on this area. Will such a solution be beneficial for the researchers? Want the separation of the theater music database from, for example, the Encyclopedia of Theatre available on the website of the Theatre Institute make the research more complicated? These questions and the other ones will remain valid until at least the platform officially opens. Life will probably verify all the ambitious intentions of the creators. However, I do hope that such a worthwhile project will not be lost in the flurry of other options available, reintroducing a huge amount of the music of great value back to the reality. The pre-premiere presentation of this platform would take place next Sunday. It's a closed event just for the small group of specialist professionals. The public and official premiere of the platform is planned for January 2025. This website address, musicgranar.com, should be valid since January. So I wholeheartedly invite you to just have a look in January, because not now, in January, just to check what happened, what changed, and if there is any place for you maybe to make some research on the Polish theatrical music, because as far as I'm concerned, due to my work for this platform, the amounts of high quality compositions presented there would be a great vast area also for the research on the Polish theatrical often forgotten music. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
Thank you very much, Katarzyna, for your interesting lecture, for showing us another side of renewing music. Very important, I think. Today morning, Professor Marek Hołoniewski told us, among others, about using old masters music. The problem you decided to discuss concern collecting and sharing musical settings written to theater, yes? We all know, and you mentioned it, that the institution that should be involved in this kind of project is the Zbigniew Raszewski Theatre Institute. So I am interested in possibilities of cooperation between the Music Granar and Raszewski Institute in future, of course, because you mentioned that there was a problem with the cooperation at the time of creating Music Granar. And the second issue I'm interested in is where, in your opinion, can we find potential of use this base? If I can name the Granar just a base, how can we improve this potential?
Thank you for these questions. Well, from the beginning of the project, since I started to take part in it, in constructing it, thinking about it, it was primarily meant to be an archive of the Polish theatrical music. This commercial path was something additional. After time, due to all these problems and growing base of the music available, Stokłosa decided to reorganize his thinking and to focus on the commercial point instead of the archive, what is for me is not really such a wonderful idea, I would say, because I believe it's much more valuable as something that would be available for the vast publicity to just learn something, to just research something, rather than to commercially use it. At the beginning, from the beginning, it was said, it was discussed that we will do it with the Raszewski Institute, Theatre Institute in Warsaw, as something additional, like an addition to the encyclopedia on the theater. And then it seemed to be a perfect idea, because if we have in this encyclopedia, we have huge amounts of very valuable information about the plays, about the creators, about the authors, then we could link directly to the music from the play that is discussed. This idea was perfect, and that's why I'm very sad it doesn't work. And that's my question, if it works separately at least, because if we have to connect, like, here the encyclopedia, here the music, it would be much more complicated and not so united. So it's again the problem of distinguishing these two areas of study, which is not so, it makes not so much sense as it would be like connected. I don't know what happens in the future. I do hope they will just get in touch and decide to cooperate at least. But I don't know. For now, the information I have received on Monday from Veronika, there are such huge problems that they decided to just do it on their own. Music Granar decided to do it on their own because it was like their obligation from the theaters that they will agree for this music to be reused in the commercial potential if there happen. They will be put into this archive, just presented to the wide public audience. So I do really hope it would work at the time, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in January, but it will just appear someday as a united idea. And the second question was about the potential. I would say that my main idea the points I just mentioned from the beginning of this cooperation with Music Granar is that it should be extended by the scores, by the scenarios, by any audiovisual material that could allow us to put this music in context. Because for now, for me, if I'm listening to the music from, I don't know, Jaś and Małgosia by Maksymiuk from the Białystok Puppet Theater, it's just, I do know the story, but I cannot imagine how it worked in this play. If I had any information about the play itself and about, for example, the details of usage of this music, it would be much more profitable. It would make much more sense from the analytic point of view, I would say. So I do believe that expanding this archive by scores, by scenarios, by audiovisual materials, so in some way connecting with the encyclopedia on theater and adding, for example, scores would be the perfect solution. But how it works, nobody knows. We shall see in the future. I hope, I really do hope, because for now it's like autumn 2024. There is almost 2,100 of pieces for now in the Music Granar, and like 3 times more waiting for being selected and edited to be added to the base. So it's a huge amount. It's a huge work and huge, vast possibility of research, of getting to know, of being interested, of loving just the others or of the composers we know very well from different contexts. So this small part of their repertoire, of their works from the theater, put out of the context for now, but maybe later will be put on again. Would be very interested, I believe, but shall see. Life would show how it works.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katarzyna Figat. I am your fellow in waiting for combining Raszewski Theatre Institute and Music Granar base, because I dream on a possibility to listen music of, for example, Polish composer who in 50s when they need money, they just written music for theaters. So I'm very interesting what was the music settings by Mecielski, by Lutosławski, by Penderecki, and so on and so on. So I will wait for combining the institution. Thank you very much. I cannot see any hands. Would someone would like to join to discussion? Would someone would like to ask a question to Dr. Katarzyna Figat? So I give microphone to Agnieszka Cieślak-Krupa for organizers.
Thank you so much. I extend my gratitude to all the speakers and all the participants for the insightful contributions and for engaging discussions today. So we will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. for the final day of our conference. We have another exciting lineup of presentations and discussions, and I'm sure that you'll find them also inspiring. So thank you once again for your participation, and I hope to see you all tomorrow morning. Have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.